I'm going to start with Joe, if that's all right. Will you tell us a bit about yourself? You told me you'd tell me every life event you had.
Yeah, now how long do you have?
I have about 4 hours. Keep going.
My name is Joe Roche and I'm a music therapist. I'm originally from Clonmel. I was away for quite a while, but I'm back living there again now, based there. I suppose I started life as an opera singer. I was an opera singer for over 20 years. I sang at the Royal Opera House in Covent Garden, and for about the decade from 2012 to 2022, I was in the ensemble at Welsh National Opera in Cardiff. So we were based in Cardiff, but we also toured the UK and internationally. And so singing's been my whole life, really. But a few years ago, things changed in Ireland when my parents had a series of misfortunes, I suppose. My father had a series of heart attacks and subsequently a triple bypass. And around the same time, my mother was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. So I returned on compassionate leave to take care of my mum while my dad was recovering in hospital. And during that time, I became aware of just how hard it was for people dealing with dementia in general. And it was affecting such a big part of the older population that I knew that there was a lot of people like me who were going through this very difficult phase of trying to care for people. Through my work in Cardiff, though, I did quite a bit of outreach there and realised that the power of music to help people with dementia was quite exceptional. But I wasn't sure exactly how it worked, so I decided to put my psychology degree from almost 20 years earlier to good use. I went back to the University of Limerick and retrained as a music therapist, and I just graduated this year. So since then, I've been working with older people with dementia. I also work with people in palliative care, people with life-limiting illness, and I am currently working also in the CBS High School in Clonmel, which is where I met Paddy. And there I work with neurotypical and neurodiverse teenage boys over a range of issues around social issues, emotional regulation, well-being, and using music just as a way to begin a journey for them in understanding the power of therapeutic approaches. And one of the benefits of music therapy is that it can sometimes sidestep some of the stigma that is attached to psychotherapy, especially for kids who may see it as some sort of an awkward sort of admission of weakness in front of their peers. And instead, we work through music, particularly through drumming, and this gives them a chance to sort of explore their feelings and emotions and things that are going on with them without getting into it in too heavy a way or in a way that makes them feel awkward. So I've been very privileged to work there and in a few other areas as well. So that's me.
And so, Pat, do you know he's famous? He's on YouTube for proposing to his wife.
Oh, gee, yeah.
On stage, where?
In Cardiff at the Wales Millennium Centre in a dress rehearsal.
And she said no.
Oh, right. And in the words of Ray Keane, we'll say, is that your current wife?
That's my current wife.
That's good, yeah. Oh, no, sorry, Ray Keane goes, oh, my first wife, and that's what he says. Or he's going, yeah. Oh, fair play. And I think you mentioned a lot of things, I suppose, before even he's into, I suppose, the child aspect as well. The fact the music can be so powerful for people with dementia, we'd say as well.
Yeah, there's a huge amount of research behind the relationship between dementia, particularly Alzheimer's disease, and music. And put simply, for people who are losing their memory and losing awareness and cognitive abilities, music is the last thing to go. Functional MRIs can show the activity of the brain under different circumstances, and it's quite clear that music activates almost all of the brain. It's one of the very few activities that actually does that. And as a result, a person who has maybe lost the ability to recall their own name or recognize their nearest and dearest might still recount all the lyrics of the song they learned when they were 18 or 19. There's even what we call a reminiscence bump around the time a person is between maybe 16 and 25 years of age, that the music that they experience, the music that influences them then, stays with them right until the end of life. So when we're working with people, we'll see their age and then we'll look back and see, what were the popular songs of that day. And often a person who can't be reached any other way, someone who's even become non-verbal, will actually be reached through that music.
That's very powerful.
Mm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thanks.
So
Thanks, Linda.
it's fascinating, and it's also a great privilege to meet someone in that way.
Yeah, well, thanks. Thank. I think there's I'll move on to Ciara Jane.
That's some introduction now, Ciara.
Yeah,
You-
yeah.
you- you have to
I'm a
follow
play
that.
therapist. Goodbye.
I told you as well. We do love a good tangent, so
You set me up anyway there. So my name is Ciara Jane Brett. I am from Cork originally, but I married into my first husband is from Waterford. So I live in Waterford and I am a non-directed play therapist. I originally wanted to become a play therapist around 20 years ago when we had a guest lecturer in WIT where I trained as a social care worker come in and sell it so well that it stayed with me. And then when I went into my first role in residential care working with children, with, usually was with children who had experienced trauma, complex trauma often, this was something that I kept in the back of my head saying, this is how they could be reached. This is how these children's emotions and true felt feelings could be reached through play therapy. So then I trained in CIT and I have been practicing privately, and I set up my own private practice in Waterford City going on 12 months ago. So we're based in the Waterford City Centre now, and I work with 2 other therapists who do adolescent psychotherapy, play therapy, family therapy. So it's a nice mixed bag of people. So it's lovely to have other people that you can bounce things off of. Even today, meeting himself, we were able to just talk about different things. So yeah, it's not as eloquent as him, but it'll
that's
do for now.
fantastic. That's fantastic. And I suppose before we start any podcast, Paddy always asks me, we don't have to introduce ourselves again. So we'll leave that out.
Okay.
Yeah, we're always good on that as well. So I suppose we looked at, I suppose for someone new to, I suppose, both music therapy and play therapy, I might go with you first, Ciara Jane, just in terms of, I suppose, in a concise way, which I often struggle with in various parts of my life. But what is music or what is play therapy? Sorry.
Well, play therapy is an age appropriate, so developmentally appropriate form of therapy that can reach children from the ages of, it can start out as young as 3 and can go on to like 16 and stuff like that. And it does depend on cognitive abilities and the child's willingness to engage in play. But it's a real gentle therapy that supports a child going through different milestones, and it's based in neuroscience and it's developmentally appropriate, so that we are very conscious of the age that the child is going through, so the things that might affect them, such as hormones and all of these things, such life events as like starting school and changing schools, all of these different things that would affect children. And so within the play therapy setting, our big emphasis is on the therapeutic relationship and thinking about what, like, for a play therapy session for me, it starts in the waiting room where I watch the child leaving their parent, their carer, whoever's brought them to the session, and how they engage with me from there, whether they're able to come into the session or not, whether they need their parent there. There's a whole thing there. So that's the attachment aspect of it. And then we go on into the therapy itself. So, and even going straight back out to when everything is finished and how they re-engage with their parents. So play therapy can cover so many things, and there's so much research to show how the benefits of it and its ability to support children with different forms of trauma, anxiety, who are dealing with parent separation, who are dealing with bullying issues in school. So yeah, it's a something that I'm privileged to be able to work in and educate people on. And the main aspect, actually, now that I'm talking, a large part of what happens in play therapy is down to actually the engagement with the parents and the carers. So I always say to people, it's like a triangle. There's me as the therapist, there's the child, and there's the parent or the carers. And we engage with them as much, because if the child is coming into me and we're dealing with so much, unless the parents, the carers, whoever it is, are taking the advice and taking the guidance and listening to the support that we're giving them as therapists, it's not going to work. And so thankfully we have these amazing parents who engage in this psychoeducation, and they learn so much, because every day is a school day. Like me, myself, as a therapist and as a parent, I talk to other therapists during peer supervision and my own supervision that I attend, and you just learn so much all of the time. So play therapy is just not one small thing. It, like all therapies, it covers a whole.
How do you get your clients? Like, are they recommended to you, or what way does it work?
Well, because I'm in private practice, I deal a lot. Well, I have referrals from TUSLA, I have referrals from community development projects, um, GPs, schools, school secretary. I have a school secretary in a school somewhere in the country who appears to love me, because she sends so many people my way, and I have never met this woman. So they just get your name in their mouth, and it's great. Like, it's absolutely fabulous. So yeah, and the main one, parent referral.
Like, so if there was a parent or a student in school, how would we kind of know to recommend play therapy compared to other therapies or whatever?
Well, I
Like,
suppose
how
you have
would
to
you know
look
to make
at
a
what
difference?
what's happening for the child. Is it an emotional issue? What is happening there? The other thing to think about as well is, if you're recommending for them to go privately, are the parents in the space where they can hold that child? So that is a big part of it as well. So a child might come to me, and it might be a referral in from TUSLA or something, and they could be in between homes. But I can't, on good faith and ethically, I shouldn't take that, because they need to be ready for this therapy. They need to be in a structured environment where they can be supported in their processing and being held while they're in therapy. Like any of us, where you're quite vulnerable when you're in therapy. As an adult who goes to regular therapy, you're vulnerable in a good way, because you're able to hold it. But as a child, it's a little bit different. So yeah, there's many ways of referring in. And other therapists, we all refer on to each other as well.
Like, would you imagine, like, or would you think for a parent, like, to admit or to kind of think about referring, is it a hard thing? Would you find
Oh
that?
goodness, of course. Some parents are
Like, how do you
very
decide?
open to it.
How would a parent decide? Right, my child needs play therapy.
Well,
What are the common behaviours, or is there
well,
anything
at
that
the
would stand
moment,
out?
we're seeing a lot of anxiety, and we do know that that's based in it's COVID related in part. So with the kids that are being referred in now, and if a parent was sort of questioning themselves, should I engage with play therapy? One, I'd talk to the school and see how the child is presenting in school. A big thing to me with the schools is that if they're saying, oh, there's never, they're never as quiet as mouse, they're so good, are they that people pleaser? But when they come home, then are they like a little bomb ready to explode? So they're holding themselves all day at school, and then they come home and it's like, oh, I'm in my safe space, I'm with my parents, I'm with my attachment figures. And it's almost, I always say this, but an insult. It's an insult disguised, but it's a compliment disguised as an insult. Because parents are like, oh my goodness, what am I doing wrong? It's like, you're not doing wrong. What you're doing is that your child feels safe enough that they can explode when they're with you. And they can show you all of that and know that you're still going to love them.
I see that in school. Like, you would see the behaviour would be perfect in school, and then the parents just go out and say when they go home, it's just a release. It's kind of a release in their valve that they're trying to control it in school, and then when they go home,
Yeah,
it's
yeah. So for those parents, one, there's no harm in ringing a play therapist. I've often had parents ring me and just say, what do you think? And it could be that I give them advice and we stay on the phone for like 20, 30 minutes and they go away and I never hear from them again. Or it could be that they try the things I've recommended and, okay, it's not working. They might be just a short-term solution and then they might come back. But there's options then for, like, I do parenting advice, so the psychoeducation aspect. But for those parents thinking, will I ring? Ring somebody, email somebody, just get that little bit more of advice. But the big things for parents as well to remember is your child and you are the expert on this child. So if your gut feeling is saying to you, I really think they need something, and the other people around you are trying to talk you out of it, go with your gut. Moms and dads, ye know your children best. Ye know them. These are the children you've reared. So I would always say to parents, what's your gut instinct telling me? What is it saying now? And often it's the truth. And it's that I need that extra little bit of support.
Thanks.
For the lads, the audience out there, if any have any questions at any stage, because we can't think of everything, and Pat definitely won't think of everything. So if you have any questions, fire them in there as well. You just put your hand up and we'll.
Yeah, we have a question. Yeah.
What age group are you in with play therapy? Up to what age? Like, is it teenagers? Is it young? You know, or is it all ages?
Well, personally, I deal with 3 to 12, maybe 13 years old, but there's other therapists who do work with kids who are up to around 16. But that's my area that I.
It works as well, does it, for like up to 16?
Well, you see, there's some therapists who are trained in adolescent psychotherapy as well, so that helps there. But I would recommend an adolescent psychotherapist for an older age group. And there's plenty of play therapists who are trained in that area as well. So I really only take up to around 12, 13 years. Yeah.
Super, actually. Yeah. Perfect. Yeah.
What's you now, Joe?
Yeah.
What is music therapy? Now, for a fella that can't sing, he can't dance, he can't.
I can
write.
dance.
He actually is a good
I'm
jiver.
a very good driver.
Bit of a limp at the moment.
I do. I know I have a big claim in. I wasn't supposed to say that on the podcast. No, we never discussed my healthcare history before we started the podcast. We'll tell you that afterwards. So anyway, we got to go with music therapy.
Music therapy is the use of music and music-based activities towards non-musical goals. So, in other words, it's music, but not for music's sake. So, a bit like a play therapist uses play as a modality to reach a child, a music therapist uses music as a bridge between them and their client. I would say the population that would take advantage of music therapy would be slightly broader. So we're talking about anything from, 2 years of age to 92 years of age, all sorts of circumstances. Music therapy can help support people with emotional, cognitive, psychological, and physical needs, depending on how it's going to be applied. I suppose music therapy is the ultimate complementary therapy in a way. A lot of the time in larger HSE institutions, music therapists would work in a multidisciplinary team, that's a big word, maybe with speech and language therapists, occupational therapists, physiotherapists, and would help them to try and achieve the aims that they have with their clients. So for instance, in a previous place I worked alongside a speech and language therapist and a particular child with learning delay who was also having difficulty with specific sounds. And the more conventional speech and language therapeutic approaches weren't really having much an effect. But this particular child had an affinity for clocks and had difficulty with his T sounds. So one of the things I did was compose a little song all about him, with his name, with his parents' names, with his dog's name, and lots of activities around the clock. And basically, by working with him over time, got him to sing back the words tick-tock to me, tick-tock, or as a kind of response to the song. Music has a way of motivating people in a way that other modalities don't quite reach. There's a sort of a hormonal endorphin release when we reach a sort of a musical satisfaction, and it can be very habit forming. A very good example of that actually is in the National Rehabilitation Hospital in Dundleary, which is an exceptional sort of an institution in Ireland. It is the only real place where they do spinal injury and brain injury rehabilitation, and they have a big music therapy department there. And if you go in at any point, you could easily see 2 music therapists and 2 physiotherapists walking down the corridor with somebody who's trying to retrain their walking gait after having maybe a serious car accident. And the 2 music therapists will be singing and playing guitar, walking in front and behind the person, and using the meter of the music to motivate them to take that extra step. So for instance, you might find that the physio is able to get the person to repeat the exercise for 30 or 40 seconds by themselves, but you introduce the right type of music alongside it, and they can increase that to 3 to 5 minutes. And suddenly the results are just accelerated. And as a result, there is a significant investment in music therapy in that establishment. Unfortunately, it hasn't translated to the rest of the country. We're still not regulated. And so there is no HSE grade for music therapists, which is a crying shame. But at the moment, there are reviews in process to try and get that fixed.
Also, calling yourself a music therapist, I suppose, I heard, is it nutrition or dietitian, one of those, there isn't set criteria at the moment
Exactly,
for
yeah.
music therapy either.
Not regulated.
Yeah.
So, it's there is no grade for it in
Yes,
HSE
yeah,
effectively, which
okay.
means that there are music therapists working full time in the HSE and in the education sector, but they're usually on a senior physiotherapist grade or a senior play therapist grade even, but no actual grade for music therapists.
Okay, that's very interesting, I suppose. And even what you said about, walking as well, because we often hear, we'd say about people listening to music and different songs before matches and things like that, we'd say. And
Yeah.
personally, I do a lot of driving around the country, and I find whether it is a podcast, compare that to music, it's a lot easier to switch off with music, whereas sometimes you can be more tired when you get to the destination. When it is a podcast, maybe there's more cognitive load in that. Or
Yeah,
something.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And some of the things that we find through music anecdotally, the things that we discover about it, how it makes us feel, the way it motivates us. Say a lot of people will go running with rhythmic music in their ears. We take that sort of information, but then heavily research it.
Okay.
So everything that music therapists do is evidence-based, backed up by decades of stringent research. And music therapists engage in reflective practice. So whatever they're doing, it's always towards a goal. It's always towards an aim. And I suppose I was saying to Paddy earlier, one of the ways that we explain music therapy is also to explain what it isn't.
Yes.
And it isn't entertainment. It isn't there, to go in and make somebody feel nice by playing some nice music for them. That is sometimes something that happens, but that's not what we're there for. There's always an overarching goal, and there are objectives then in line with that goal in order to help us measure how successful we're being. So for instance, if we're helping someone who's suffering from terminal illness, who's suffering from depression, for instance, we will use standardized scales to try and measure the level of their mood and their depression. And then as we work with them and try to alleviate that depression, again, measure our success, and then recalibrate what we're doing in order to try and meet the needs of the client. It's very, very client-centered, very, very client-directed. Everything is about what their need is, and to work with their stress. Whatever they can do, that's what we grab hold of and help them to do.
I just have a question for both of you. So, do you ever find, like, with music therapy and play therapy, so there's a person looking for therapy, right, and they'd say music therapy, sure, that's only going in playing music, or it's doing, or play therapy, it's just, sure, that's them going in playing. Well, where's the therapy in that? Like, how do you get over that? Or how would you explain that? Like Joe, I suppose we've talked before, like when you came into school, music therapy, I thought you'd have to be good at music, or that's a misconception probably that's there.
It's probably one of the biggest misconceptions about music therapy is that to avail of it, you have to be musical, or you have to have some musical skill or ability. And the whole idea actually is that we use music as a sort of a bridge, an interpersonal bridge. You don't need to know anything about it beforehand. And in fact, sometimes it's actually easier if you don't. If you don't have a complicated relationship with music to begin with, then you can start fresh. It can be a blank slate. And it's really about the relationship between the client and the therapist. The music is something we use to build a bridge between us, to gain trust, to gain understanding. A person is using musical instruments and we're talking about very simple musical instruments now that aren't complicated, that don't require any previous experience to play in order to express themselves. And particularly for people who find that they can't find the language to express how they're feeling. For instance, so if you're dealing with young children with trauma, one of the reasons why they're difficult to sort out is because they don't have the language to explain to you what's going on with them. They don't understand it themselves. But by giving a different outlet, a non-verbal outlet like music, to express it, and then to show them that they're heard, This is very important because one of the main functions of a music therapist is to make a person feel like they are being understood, they are being listened to, that when they express something, it matters. And say for the instance of neurodiverse children often have different experience growing up and going through developmental milestones than neurotypical kids, because neurotypical kids put something out into the world communication wise, and it's fed back to them that people understand it, and it's reinforced, and it's how they grow. But say for a child with learning delay or a child with autism, that often doesn't happen. But music is a way for them to express themselves and to feel understood, and that's a big part of moving through the
And
developmental
would you
milestones.
find that there is that kind of barrier there when you talk about music therapy, that it is a barrier, that people think it's just music, or how
Absolutely.
it is a barrier?
Yeah. And as someone who comes from a performing background as well, I find it particularly sort of frustrating in a way that what people don't realize is that it is for specific goals and a very wide range of goals as well. And music therapists, of course, all come from different backgrounds as well, because they tend to come from musical backgrounds. So they bring whatever that musical background, be they a jazz musician or an opera singer like myself or a rocker, and they take that into the therapeutic practice with them. So we all have a specific training as well, then, that allows us to use whatever musical skill or background we have in a therapeutic way. And we're all working off the same hymn sheet in the sense of the protocols we use and the evidence base that we work from.
Ciara, the same question for you.
Yeah. Now, I think that my time in play therapy has been a better time because the people who trained me, I think, had to hit that wall far more than I've had to hit that wall. The understanding is much more there with play therapy, and the appreciation of it is much stronger than it would have been for talk, say 20 years ago. But yeah, so when I'm explaining it to people, I do explain it a lot with the neuroscience connected to it, as with music therapy. And like even when we were talking there, I just kept thinking about drumming and all of these lovely things that cross over the brain, and so you have to use the right side of your brain, the left side of your brain, and do all of these different things, and there's wonderful research based in its effects on depression. So for play therapy, when I'm trying to support a parent or a carer, I do go back to neuroscience quite a bit, and I go back to the attachment relationship, but I often go back to that parent, and I'm going to say parents and I mean carers as well, were they played with. So I often go back to their own history as well. So when I'm doing an intake meeting with a parent, I go back to even conception and, what the pregnancy was like, what the birth was like. We do a full history because there is research to show that, in utero, there can be traumas experienced, when there's stressors on a pregnancy, all of these things. So the reason I brought this tray was to show how to play like a play therapist, because we don't in general ask any questions unless it's needed, but in general we sort of sit with the child and reflect on what the child is doing, and even at the start we track what the child is doing. So what we're doing there is attuning to the child and showing them that this adult is watching you. So one of the basic bits of advice I often give parents is to just sit and play with your child where you don't give any instructions, where you don't direct the play, but you just engage with the play and see where that play develops on from. And that to a child is better than any brand new toy. That's time with their parents, it's time with their attachment figure in their life. It's time, this one-on-one time where the parent is just attuning, where they're just watching them and engaging within the play itself. So when I'm like a long way around, but I do always go back to and I use the toys to show all these different things about, how a child can feel. But I do base it a lot with the attachment, about going back to the parents' own history of, can you remember when you were played with? And oftentimes, unfortunately, some parents never got played with, so now they're relearning this thing that they might never have gotten to do. And when I say weren't played with, I'm usually meaning it with an adult. They might have played with their friends and stuff like that, their peers, but sometimes they didn't have that one-on-one time with their parent to experience play. So they're missing that. So sometimes I bring a parent in and play with them, and they are so uncomfortable. But once they get into it, it's such a lovely way of being with your child. If you can cut that out in your day, like 20 minutes a day, not even, I'm not saying 7 days a week, but where it's possible, it's a lovely little thing to have for this one-on-one time with you and your child. So I base a lot of it in telling them all of that stuff. Sorry, that was very long-winded.
So it's not about what the toys you have or whatever, or
No.
whatever you use. It's about how
No.
you're analysing everything
Yeah.
you're doing.
I'm reflecting on what's happening within the play itself. So it could be like, I have these like penguins, and so you could like reflect on, oh, I wonder, are they like a mommy or a daddy? That's not reflecting, but that's I'm wondering. But you would watch the actions of what's happening, and then you might reflect on, if one of them is looking for something, oh, he's busy, and so you start to reflect on. So that's the tracking aspect of it. So you're reflecting on what's happening. And then you start going into, as you get to know the child, the feelings that are emerging within it and reflecting that back to the child. And you sometimes get it wrong, and that's okay. And so that's the permission I give parents as well. Get it wrong. It's okay to get it wrong. They'll tell you very fast, no, that's not what he's doing, and you then get to what it is. And it's like, oh, but even in that, you're sort of role modeling for the child that it's okay to make a mistake. Everything sort of has a knock-on effect that can be really quite lovely. So it's not about the toys. It's about what happens and like the relationship that's in there. But obviously the toys are, nice as well.
How do you measure success, like for the both of you? How would you know that the therapy is working?
Well, there's different stages that you kind of monitor in play therapy. And you do get to a stage like there's a starting, where you're getting to know each other. Then there's like a stage where you're processing. And then you sort of, towards the end, like if a child has come to you with, for talking sake, like they're grieving. Like I had a child before who came to me, and she was grieving the death of an attachment figure. And it's so subtle, but you wait for it. And when it comes, it's quite powerful. And as a therapist, you kind of feel it in the room. It's a strange way. And sometimes that's the part that's hard to communicate, that felt sense. And that can be the hard part to communicate of, I think we've gotten to this side, but it does take a while, and you're watching the processing as it goes on. So it's not like one day they've come in and whoops, done. It's a process. And
Do siblings play a part in the therapy as well? Like, do you have to bring siblings ever, like their brothers or sisters, or?
I have, but not necessarily. And I know there's lots of therapists who don't work with siblings, but I've worked with siblings, not in the same therapy session, but as in they both came to see me, and I've done that. But that's a thing for each therapist to decide on. But I have brought a child's sister into the session where I felt it was necessary for them to play together, because she so wanted her sister to witness her play and her time. And it wasn't that she felt under pressure to allow her sister into the session. It was a wanting, and I think it was a support. And that's what it did. As long as it supported the play therapy, that was okay. I don't just willy-nilly bring siblings or anybody else. Sometimes you bring a parent into the session or the attachment figure into the session.
Is it very much, is play therapy very much individual?
Yeah.
Rather, like Joe, you can do both with music therapy.
Yeah, and we work in different case situations with individuals or with groups. For instance, when I worked in a residential care home with older clients, we would often have a group of maybe 6 to 8 people, and they would be brought to that group because they shared similar needs. So, for instance, you might have a similar progress along dementia diagnosis. but they may be all in a situation where socially they're not integrating in where they're living. So the aims of a group like that would be something like to promote social interaction, also to promote the relationship between the residents themselves and maybe some of the carers who work with them, because that's a big part of things as well. A big part of the work in a residential care home like that would be to try and bridge the gap between the clients and the people who work with them, because you have a very, very different status between and level of agency between a carer or a nurse who works in a residential care home and the clients, who often feel almost like prisoners. But if you can introduce a kind of a structured activity that everyone brings themselves to and brings their own music to it, then what you have is a kind of a dissolving of the titles and the statuses, and people just bring themselves. And instead of it becoming, this nurse and this resident, they just become two people. And when you break down those barriers, then it changes the nature of the care home entirely, because the people who are there caring are now invested beyond, clocking in and clocking out and earning their money. They're now caring for people they care about, and the level of trust that the residents have for the people who are working with them increases. Their moods improve, and then you hear stories back about how they're spontaneous singing, maybe in the recreation room, sometimes of songs that they've learned together, and through, especially for the people with dementia, scaffolding by repetition, finding familiar songs, and then maybe even rewriting them so that those songs are particularly applicable to these people. But then just going back to slightly a little bit what you were talking about, how do you judge how successful you're being? So for all these groups, you would have overall goals. So one of them might be to increase social interaction within the group. But then under the goal, you'll have specific objectives. And it might be, that each client will respond verbally, musically, or physically to the mention of their own name. Each client will have a verbal or musical interaction with at least one other client. And as the session goes on, you're watching for all these things. And then you're adjusting your objectives and your goals for the next sessions accordingly. So this is what I was saying about what music therapy isn't. Before I was a music therapist, I would often go and perform in daycare centres and residential homes for older people, purely for entertainment. But there are no goals with this. You come in, you play your songs, you leave again. This is about focusing those effects very, very clearly, and then evaluating to what extent are you being successful, and then rejigging your approach to come back the following time and try and make it better. And so you're constantly trying to find ways to improve the quality of the lives of the people you're working with.
You mentioned there about your mum having dementia. Have you used music therapy with your mum?
Yeah.
What would that look like?
Usually it involves us sitting down together, and I'll bring my guitar with me, and we'll sing through some of her favourite songs. Now, my mother used to be a musician as well. She was an accordion player, but unfortunately, due to physical immobility and cognitive decline, she's no longer able to do that. And it's something that she finds very, very frustrating at times when she remembers that she used to play it. And unfortunately, I can't get her to put it anywhere else except in front of her in the living room. And it reminds her of her own limitations. But we'll sing her songs together. And she will go from being quite non-verbal, and her verbal fluidity will be very poor, to by the end of the session where she's able to make much more coherent sentences, but just for a short period of time. But more importantly, the songs are a chance to reminisce about the times that she associated with them. It's a chance to reconnect her to her own life story, because that's something that, when we're communicating with people with dementia, we're really thinking about the interaction we're having and the experience we're having. But can you imagine what it would feel like to have your entire sense of who you are pulled out from under you, and how frightening that is? So when you bring someone into an experience of their music, they realize, I am a person. I have a history. I have a status in this world, and this music is grounding me in that, reminding me of who I am. And maybe it reminds me of the fact that I've raised children. Maybe it reminds me of the fact that I had a job. It reminds me of all the things I've done, even for a little while. But while the actual memory then fades, the logical, say, the semantic memory fades, the emotional memory stays. So a person who may not remember that they had a music therapy session an hour ago will still have a lot of the emotional benefit and hormonal benefit of having done it. And then that helps them interact with others, which again helps to create better situations for them. There are fewer incidents of anxiety and upset and people acting out because there's music therapy present.
I think that's incredibly powerful what you said, like the fact that sometimes when we're interacting with a person with dementia as well, we are focusing on from our perspective. We're not, I suppose, we're not thinking about the person themselves and the fact that their identity, you know, maybe tied up, we'll say, and music is a vehicle. So I think when I was listening to both, I suppose both people in your impacts, I suppose both play therapy and music therapy absolutely brilliantly as well. But I was thinking in my own head, and I could be wrong, I was thinking play and music was just the vehicle, the first part, like when the child is playing, it is how they're playing, how they're interacting. That's telling you so much about their inner self as well. And the same with the music, it's just a kind of a vehicle to get the person back into that, as you said, maybe a hormonal or the emotional response as well.
Absolutely.
That's incredible.
Vehicle is a good word for it.
Yeah.
I think, yeah.
And with play therapy, because it's so based on the individual, some children might never finish with therapy, especially those who've experienced complex trauma. So you might see a child for 26 sessions and then they might be back to you in a year's time, 2 years' time. So it all really is individual, and how sometimes parents know or the therapist will know, oh, it's time to finish, or they're going to do their closing sessions because we do countdowns to when they're finishing up, is what's happening outside of the therapy room as well. It's what's happening in the room, but what is the experience like outside of the room? And that's where, again, it comes back into you being that little triangle with the parents. And oftentimes we work with the schools as well. Like I talk to schools on a daily basis, practically, about different children that I'm working with. So it's almost like a community effort, you know, to support this child. And when it works really, really well.
And would you ever discharge your client and then they come back for a top up?
Yes.
What are therapies?
Yes.
Yeah.
Regularly. And that's exactly what I call it. It's a little top up.
Just that was impressive, wasn't it?
I think
I thought I was after messing that up there.
No.
there was a bit of a laugh there, right? There was a bit of a laugh there when you
That's
said it.
exactly what I call it. And it could be that the child has had a sibling. It could be that the child is moving schools or going into a new term in school. It could be just that the child needs a top up, or they could be coming back into for another allocation of sessions. But I have done top ups regularly. Yeah.
You know, like, how do you mind your own well being? It's gonna, like, Joe, you've talked about palliative care, and like you've surely come across cases where they've been really
complex
bad.
trauma, yeah.
Would you have to continuously go for therapy yourself, and what, like, obviously it wouldn't be play therapy for you, or would you go for music therapy, Joe, or what do you do, or have you someone?
Yeah, there is a type of music therapy that I engage in sometimes. There's a chap in Galway who works through vocal psychotherapy, and I find it a great release because I use my voice to help explore some of the things that I'm experiencing myself as I work with my clients. And as you rightly say, you know, a big part of the job and an ethical responsibility for any therapist is to take care of themselves. You can't you can't help someone put on their life jacket until you've inflated your own first. You have to look after yourself. Yes.
Do you think over the last couple of years the stigma is gone, would say, with people going for therapy, or has it improved?
It's definitely improved. Just we as therapists, we also do like supervision with other therapists that help us so that we can unload cases and chat, talking through. We do peer supervision, all of that stuff, as well as personal therapy. But yeah, that is something that we're hoping the stigma is reducing. It's definitely reducing in play therapy, but even like my own, I get killed for saying this, but my own mother is like, what is it? Like, what do you do? Like, you just play with her. So it's that educational piece is very beneficial. So that's why podcasts like these, like guest talks, all of that are very beneficial for both of our areas, so that another person becomes a little bit more aware, and another person perhaps gives themselves permission to attend therapy, to sort of say, well, that one was talking about therapy, and then that person beside her was talking about therapy, and they're all engaging in their own personal therapy, and realizing that, take that stigma away. If you need it, go get it, because it is of such good benefit, and I think every person should be in therapy. Really do.
Now, will we have any more questions there? We're going to do something interactive now, aren't we?
I thought you were going to ask another 5 or 6. I was
No,
conscious of the
no.
audience. Yeah.
We're going to pick on someone, are we?
Yeah, if that's okay.
We're going to demonstrate a bit, are we?
Yeah, I'm going to just give a short and interactive demonstration. Could I ask you Okay, full disclosure, I do know this person, and we're not attempting to pull the wool over anyone's eyes. What I just want to begin with a very, very short, very basic demonstration of something that we do in music therapy sometimes, when we meet a new client in particular. And this is just a little improvisation with a little simple instrument. So this is called a tone drum. So the tone drum is tuned to a pentatonic scale, which basically means that there are no wrong notes in it. These are all melodic notes. If I play in C on the guitar and Annette plays on the tone drum, we will always be in harmony with each other. So what's very important to say to somebody is there's no wrong way to do this. This is just a chance for us to get to know each other a little bit. But rather than talking to each other and introducing each other, I'd like you to just explore the tone drum a little with the mallets and see how it sounds, see if you like the sound of it. It's a very soothing sound anyway. There's a lot of research to say that the sound from this activates the vagus nerve. It takes us out of our fight or flight reflex, or if someone's feeling a little agitated or anxious. This can help to relax them and move them into rest, digest, relax mode. And what I'm going to do then, I'll explain a little bit afterwards about what I'm going to do on the guitar. But for now, we'll just take maybe 2-3 minutes just to let music. Okay. So whenever you're ready, take your time. And like I said, there's no wrong way to do this.
No pressure.
Okay.
That is good. Is there a particular way to hold it?
Well, just hold it loosely with your hands and back in whatever way you want. Thanks very much. Excellent. Appreciate it. Big round of applause for that. So that's kind of an artificial version, as you can see, it's set up, and there's no therapeutic need, of course. But what we're trying to do as music therapists there is to give a person an opportunity to express themselves. So to begin with, most people will feel a little apprehensive, a little anxious. There'll be a lot of kind of, I don't know how to play this. I'm not musical. I don't know what this is. And we would just encourage them to just explore it, to just see what it feels like to play it. And that sort of anxiety and apprehensiveness and self-consciousness tends to eventually just dissolve a little, especially with if the therapist is actively listening, paying attention. And then we use the other instrument, then the guitar in this case, to there's a couple of different techniques I was using there. So at times I'm mirroring what Annette is playing. I'm matching what she's playing, which is slightly different in that it's more like a reflection, more like a sort of a saying, yes, I hear what you're saying.
An attunement.
An attunement, exactly, as you do with the play. You're just showing the person that you're there with them and that they're being heard. And then gradually, as time goes on, as a great art therapist said to me once, he said, if it needs to come up, it'll come up. So whatever is going on with that person will eventually start to be represented in the music. So they have that experience of release as if they've said it, even though maybe they don't have the words to actually say it. So they say it through the music instead. And the character of the music then actually informs us both as to what's going on. So afterwards, I might say to the client, so if we were going to release that as a single, what would we call it? And the next words out of their mouth will often be a big clue as to what's actually going on with them, because they'll hear in the music something that's going on with them that I won't hear, because I don't know what's behind it. I don't know what they're actually feeling at the time, but they do. So the words they use to describe it, they might just say, it sounded like loneliness to me. And that's where we begin.
Personal reflection.
You kind of match your speed as well. If she sped up, you sped up.
Yeah.
Was there a reason you kind of went faster, no? Or you just feel that?
No, I was just in the flow.
You're in the groove.
Penny, you're asking a lot of big questions there.
Yeah.
Great answer.
No.
Any more questions before we kind of finish up?
Yeah.
First of all, before we finish up, thanks very much. I wasn't actually sure what I was coming to. I just wanted to get out of the house for a while.
Either or we, you're fine.
So I just wanted to say thanks very much. A lot of stuff that you said actually resonated with me, because I'm actually going through stuff with my daughter at the moment. I've been doing care for the last 2 years, so a lot of what you said, especially with the dementia and with my daughter and the anxiety and stuff, came up. And I'm a singer as well, so I'm musical, so everything was tying in together. I was like, oh, this is great. Like, but do you feel like with both, because you said you work with kids as well in the CBS, do you feel over the last maybe few years that the word anxiety is becoming more popular? Because when we were growing up, we were just frustrated and we didn't know what actually anxiety was. And of course, the thing with playing with our parents, like back in the 80s and 90s, that never happened. Like, cause Mum and Dad were always working and get out, you know what I mean? So a lot of stuff, when you said like I'm only learning that over the last few years with my own daughter, that I suppose when we were growing up, we were so put on the side with playing with our parents and interacting with our parents. So I'm only learning myself over the last few years to actually sit back and relax and playing with my daughter.
You're learning a new skill.
100%. Like, and like every day is a new day. So I'm in the middle of that at the moment, and hormones and everything. So it's all. But do you feel? My question is, do you feel that the word anxiety is being more freely used and understood nowadays than it was to when, I suppose?
Yes, of course, definitely. And children. No, it's also been thrown around the place a little bit, Willie, here, there and everywhere. Everybody's got anxiety because everybody has anxiety. Anxiety keeps us safe.
Yeah.
You know, we all, like Inside Out 2, what a beautiful way of depicting what anxiety is.
Yeah.
We all need anxiety. It keeps us safe. It's a safety mechanism.
Yeah.
But when anxiety creeps into your life and starts to disrupt your daily life events, that's when then you have to sort of look at it a little bit differently. When it stops you from going to things, when it stops you from engaging, then we have to look at it differently. But yeah, anxiety, people are more educated on it. People are understanding of it, and that it's a real thing that can stop somebody from doing so many other things. And because of the COVID and everything that happened after that, and the fact that our kids missed so much of their socialization within the school systems and being around their peers, and were taught that, like, distance yourself. Prior to COVID, we were like up here, everybody, you know, friends, you know, play together outside, and then all of a sudden it was, vroom, there's a shutdown. So there is, you know, the research that's being done now is all showing that. So I do think it's rearing its head much more now and earlier on than we would have seen it before. So yeah, it's a blessing, but it's a blessing that's come from something, you know, that was unfortunate.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Pat, you can wrap it up. So
I can wrap it up. Thanks a million. We'd say, I suppose anytime we meet guests, I always say the aim is it turns into a chat. We'll say, and I think halfway through I was just I was sitting back and I was listening. I suppose I typed in a few things here about. I really like Paddy's question at the start, and when he asked about, you know, the challenges and some misconceptions that can be with both types of therapy as well. And I think I learned loads tonight as well. So I really want to thank you sincerely for your time, for coming down tonight. We'll say coming to Thurles as well tonight as well. So thanks so much. I think we all got a huge amount from it. So we might give them a bowl of bus as well. That's the primary teacher, and I haven't said clap a round of applause in about 12 years. We'll say it's always bull of us. But thanks a million for that. Thanks a million as well for Stakelums here as well, and the man that travels all the way from Wicklow to do the videoing tonight. I don't have to give Seamus in Monorail Studios, but we'll be back with him soon again as well. So thanks to Paddy as well for coming up with the idea for this as well, and most sincerely thanks very much for coming tonight as well. And sorry if I made any kind of terrible jokes, and I'm going to end on that. No.